So I watched the 2024 version of The Crow. I'll just roll the intro.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 226 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's very own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hi, Brian.
This has been an interesting week.
Has it?
Off and on, different things we're going to definitely talk about today. Inside Out 2, first animated feature to make $1 billion.
Nuh-uh.
Yes.
Wow.
Over the course of a couple of months, we've had 2 movies make the $1 billion club.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, it is possible to make a lot of money on movies.
Mm.
Hollywood isn't exactly sure what that formula is yet, apparently, because they're still scrambling, trying to figure things out. They've had their issues, and we're going to definitely talk about some of that today as well. But as you are well aware, I have had a bit of an existential crisis that I have talked about for the last 2 podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of separating art from the artist and politics from art, and how do we deal with that? How do we do this? I'm not that I'm going to dwell a ton on it, but I feel like I've gotten out of the woods with this, and I feel like this is going to be my philosophy going forward. And as someone who's in the arts, who has in the past acted, and you will be acting again, I know that you're very familiar with rhetoric. But for those who might be listening who aren't aware of what an ad hominem attack is, that is when you're having a debate, and instead of talking about your points, instead of discussing the pros or cons to your argument, you start going after the other person.
Yes.
You start talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
And that, of course, is what's known as a logical fallacy, because you're supposed to be discussing the idea, not the person.
Or in layman's term, it's called mudslinging.
Yes.
Yes. If you've probably heard the words mudslinging rather than ad hominem.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, basically it is, this argument's BS because this person's not a good person. And I thought about that and realized that maybe that needs to be my view when it comes to talking about art. And yes, very often the artist, the problems that they have bleed into their art. That's true. But if you're looking at art and reviewing art, experiencing art, the art has to stand for itself. You do have to take the person out of it. Great people have created crappy art.
Mm-hmm.
Crappy people have created great art.
Yes, for every The Stand, we have 3 The Manglers. I mean, love you, Stephen King, but the cocaine fuel did give us a couple of scary ironing machines. So
one thing that Stephen King and I have in common, one of the very few things that we have in common, is that we have both worked in laundromats. I worked in a laundromat. He worked in a laundromat. And yeah.
You write what you know.
You write what you know,
Mm-hmm.
and yes, it's horrible.
Mm-hmm.
It's terrible. So yes, I can see writing a horror story about anything in a laundromat.
An evil ironing machine.
Yeah. But I feel that a lot of the problems that we see in reviews, especially online reviews, have been this idea of trashing actors and directors and writers instead of talking about the actual piece of work itself and what the work itself does or fails to do. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. Go back into the archives of this very program and you will see me doing it over and over again. And I'm feeling like that might be something going forward that I need to get better at. When I'm talking about a piece of work, don't necessarily discuss the actors. Don't dive into the script because, of course, we can't read the script. We don't have it in front of us. Or you talk about the actors. Just talk about the work. What does the work do? And what does it fail to do? That, I feel, is going forward what my philosophy in talking about the stuff that we love. I feel like that is where I need to go from this point forward. And to test that theory, I decided to go into the fire because I had seen a lot of reviews about The Crow 2024, and I thought, okay, let's test this out. Let's see if I can actually do this. Even though I've seen a lot of reviews about it that have not been positive, And since then, I've seen a lot of reviews by people online who have not had the best things to say about it. Although I will say, as an aside, it's interesting to watch a lot of these because although the vast majority of people are saying this is a crap movie, most people don't agree on why that is. Everybody's got their own feeling about it. And here's my take on it. And why I feel like there's a lot of bad reviews for it already is that if you've read the graphic novel,
Okay.
or you've seen the movie, or
94? Okay,
yes.
94.
If you've done either of those or both, and you're going into this movie with the idea is you're wanting to see a fresh take on that stuff, then yes, you're going to be disappointed because that's not what this is.
Okay.
You do have Eric Draven, you do have Shelley, you do have this murder, and you do have this idea coming back from the dead for vengeance. And yes, there's a crow in it.
Okay.
Besides that, that's just about it. And understand that in itself is not good or bad. If you want your own take on it and you want to do your own thing, that should be fine, regardless of what the director of the original Crow movie had to say about it. This is how bad this movie's getting grief. The director from the old movie was just gleefully talking about how crappy the new movie was.
Well, he didn't want anything to do with he didn't want sequels. He didn't want anything, done after the original movie. He was adamant from the beginning.
Right.
I mean, don't touch this property.
Yes. Here's my challenge. Can I talk about this movie without talking about people? Can I just talk about the art? Let's give it a try.
Let's try it.
Okay. Did I like the movie?
No.
No, I really didn't.
Yeah, you can't see his face, but I can. He did not like this movie.
Oh, did I have resting bitch face or was it active?
No, it was active disdain.
Active disdain? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't. And let me tell you why. It feels like the movie's trying to figure out what it wants to be. Does it want to be a slow cook psychological thriller? Does it want to be the goriest action movie that you can make it? Does it want to be supernatural? What story does it want to tell? One thread that has gone through all of the iterations of The Crow is you have this idea that there is this timeless love affair between two people that is interrupted by this horrible act that winds up killing both of them. But the love between these two people is so strong that one person actually comes back from the dead for revenge, right?
Mm-hmm. We're talking about Ghost with Patrick Swayze, right?
Oh, yeah, that's Crow-like.
Yeah, it's Crow-like. Mm-hmm.
But the problem with this movie, first of all, is that if you like absolutely violent, bloody action scenes, this is the most bloody Crow that you're ever going to see. In about the last 15 minutes. Okay? When our main character finally becomes the Crow. It takes that long before we actually see Crow doing Crow stuff. Before that, it is a tediously slow plot.
So we don't get like sucking the heroin out of an addict's veins or anything like that.
No. I think there's like 2 action scenes in the whole movie, and I've heard somebody say it's 1.5, and I can see that. But besides, that's about it. The real keystone to this story is this love affair. And the problem with the movie is they spend so much time telling us that these people are in love by having them do drugs together and have lots and lots of sex that I don't see them being in love. I see this as
a very toxic relationship.
Yeah, it's a real toxic relationship that probably wouldn't have lasted a couple of years. It shouldn't have. It's just like this was an infatuation of 2 people who were in a bad situation together and found an interest in each other and did drugs together and screwed a lot, but that's not love. And to use a term that the kids like to use, it was really mid. This thing was mid. You have this love affair that wasn't. You give the villain a motivation in this movie where they've made a deal with the devil to stay young forever by offering the devil's souls, which is kind of cliched. Well,
Yeah.
Well, it's not kind of cliched. It is cliched. But the other thing about it, too, is me personally, as a storyteller, I would say that having an act of violence be completely random and unexplainable
and
is more horrible.
that never made sense to me because there was no sacrifice there. They were just giving them a random soul. It was they weren't.
Yeah.
I never.
Well, see, here's the thing.
What anyone cared about.
Well, here's the thing. There is a tie between Shelley and the villain. Part of the reason why Shelley was with Eric in the first place was they were running away from this villain. So
okay,
so yeah, you don't even get that much of it. I don't want to go in too much into the plot, although there's not an awful lot of it anyway. You have this timeless love affair that's not. You have motivations for the villains that I feel like not only were not necessary, they hamper the story in a real way. And then they steal the ending of 73 Yards for the end of the movie. So that's about all that I will say for that. So it makes perfect sense to me that this movie's not doing well. And I can understand why, especially if someone's a fan of the original Crow movie, they're not going to like this. If they're a fan of the graphic novel, they're not going to like this.
Okay.
And the very fact the studios held the reviews to the day the movie opened, saying you couldn't do reviews of the movie until the movie opened, you knew you were in for a bad ride. And
so this was one of those. Okay.
Yeah, and the studio knew as well. Lionsgate knew the reviews weren't going to be good. So going into it saying, guys, you can't release reviews until the movie's already out, that was a big red flag. Man, I feel so bad for Lionsgate right now. They are having a bad time of it. They just came off of Borderlands, which absolutely tanked. And I believe they're releasing to digital next week. It's been in theaters 2.5 weeks that are already releasing it to digital, so that didn't do well. The Crow is following that. And then Megalopolis is going to be the next thing that they release, which on paper should be amazing.
It's the Scorsese.
The Scorsese science fiction film that's crazy go nuts, and it looks like it could be really good. However, it's already having all of this controversy because of the teaser trailer. Do you know about this?
I remember. Did someone fall off a building? Sort of remember that.
Yes.
A while back.
Adam Driver. Yeah. So they released a trailer, and part of it was bad reviews that Scorsese had gotten in some of his classic movies.
Oh, okay.
Bad reviews that he'd gotten for The Godfather and and things like that. With Lawrence Fishburne doing a voiceover about how genius is oftentimes misunderstood.
Oh, okay.
So on the surface, that's kind of a bad commercial, I would say. It's like you're doing a commercial that's saying, hey, look, regardless of what people say about this movie, they just don't understand the work of this genius. And that's your that's your teaser trailer commercial. That's what you're going with. To me, that feels weird. That you would
Most insulting.
People don't know what they're talking about. Martin Scorsese is a genius. Watch this movie. Now, don't get me wrong. I think in cinema, he's a genius, and he has given us some of the greatest movies in the canon. He is definitely one of the best directors in the history of cinema. No question. But to do a teaser trailer that just bold out says it, that ain't the worst thing about the trailer. The worst thing about the trailer is all these quotes from critics who had bad things to say weren't real.
Oh, good grief.
They were made up quotes. One of the quotes that was, and I forget who it was attributed to, and I think it was for Godfather 3, which, although, wasn't the best of the trilogy, it still was a decent movie, but there were critics that had bad things to say about it. This critic wasn't one of them. The critic praised the movie, and in the trailer was said with this quote that they never said, that they didn't like it.
So is this a part of the movie that we're in an alternate reality? This is alternate history as if this had happened instead of something else?
I and some friends, including friend of the show, Kevin Pauly, discussed this. And my theory was the company that put the trailer together, instead of looking up quotes, asked an AI to give them some quotes, and AI made them up.
Oh boy.
That was my theory.
So then who do you sue for the libel slander case?
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well,
Just,
here's the thing. First of all, I was right because a news article came out yesterday saying that the company put the trailer together, used AI to get the quotes, and AI sometimes will make up shit. And that's what it did. And so the company wound up getting fired by the studio, and they've had to recut the.
Yeah.
I believe there's a new version of it now that has nasty comments about movies that Scorsese have made that are real, that actually
hopefully.
came. Yeah, so that's been taken care of. But here we go again. Is AI going to take everybody's job? Well, they're not quite there yet.
No.
At the very least, they lie. Forget about rule number one for the doctor. Rule number one for AI is AI lies. If it has to, if it sounds good. And so that was horrendous. So I feel really bad for Lionsgate because it's like they hit a nun with a tire iron in a past life or something. I don't know. It's just like they can't seem to catch a break. It's just terrible for them. And I feel bad. But yeah, it's possible to have good movies that make $1 billion. We've had a couple of them in the last couple of months or so. But then we get these movies that absolutely tank. And some of them are tanking for no apparent reason.
Yeah. Then thinking back years ago, movies that tanked that were just marketed wrong. And listening to a podcast the other day talking about The Cable Guy and what a great movie The Cable Guy really is. If it hadn't been marketed as the next Mask, as the next Ace Ventura, if it had been marketed as the next Fatal Attraction, people had known what they were getting into. They would have realized what a good movie it was, and it wouldn't have bombed, and people would have seen what a good movie it was and seen it. What are we going to know about this Martin Scorsese? What is it again? See, it's so forgettable to me.
Yeah,
I don't remember what
Megalopolis.
Megalopolis.
It's
That's
just
how much I don't
begging,
even.
Yeah, it's begging to be mispronounced.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned that because, and again, this is not necessarily my wheelhouse movie-wise. That's why I'm having a problem remembering the title of the movie. But the movie was released just recently. Blake Lively is the star of.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't. Of course, I haven't watched it. Huh?
She's in a flower shop and she has this relationship with this guy. And the guy is, and I forget the name of the guy but he's also the director of the movie, but he's also the male lead in it. And it's based off of this book. And talking about bad advertising, it's advertised as this rom-com. And it's basically a book about this woman in this horribly abusive relationship.
Right. Yes. That's all about. And the terrible interviews that they're doing about it.
It's like wear your floral patterns and take your friends to go see this movie. Watch her in this abusive relationship.
It's another toxic, like The Crow. It's a thing about toxic relationships. Wolverine and Deadpool have a better relationship than most of the movies that are coming out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a very good point for sure. But yeah, another example of just absolutely marketing this movie wrong. Again, this goes back to this entire spiral of this idea of Hollywood doesn't know how to do what they do anymore. And they're trying everything.
So much spaghetti on the wall.
And the team that brought you Barbie, Greta Gerwig and Margot Robbie, are co-producing a new movie that is a gender-swapped version of Fight Club.
Okay.
Which, as someone who's seen the original Fight Club, I'm curious about how that's going to work. It's a movie about toxic masculinity. And women don't tend to be toxic males. But again, going back, it's this idea of if you can take the spirit of something and make it your own in some way, that can be good if you're telling a good story. I'm just wondering if we're going to, because I believe Charlize Theron, they're wanting to bring her in on this. And not saying you couldn't make a great movie of Charlize Theron and Margot Robbie punching each other in the face.
Oh, yeah. Atomic Blonde.
Yeah. I'm just wondering what the theme of it's going to be.
Yeah.
Because obviously it's going to be different. But I will say, though, even though I didn't like The Crow, I did happen to go see the 3D version of Coraline.
Oh, wonderful.
Again. I did.
Yay.
And I did grit my teeth and give a silent FU when a certain person's name came up on the screen. But as you put so well, there were a lot of other people's names on that screen as well.
Right.
And I remembered why I loved this movie so much, because there was great storytelling. The remastered 3D was amazing. And because we do digital theaters now, they cranked up the frame rate to 60 frames per second so that everything was smoother. And they also had a little featurette at the end where their stop motion team recreated the Coraline figure because after 10 years it had fallen
Of
apart.
course, yeah.
But they were allowed to use technology that they're able to use today because they didn't have 3D printing.
Yeah.
So they could do things like that. And
Clay and foam and
yeah, they don't
had.
have to do that anymore. They can design it in a computer and then they can print it out. What I didn't realize is what that allows them to do is normally you do the clay figure and you would have to pass it around to all the departments and say, please be careful with it because we've only got the one. And, you have one person doing faces, you have another person who's doing the costuming, you have another person doing the hair. But now, since these things are 3D printed, print everyone a preliminary, and then each department gets their own version of it to work on their part of it. So that speeds things up. It doesn't mean that they can get movies out faster because, as they pointed out, now that they have tools that allow them to do certain parts of the task faster, now they're like, how can we make this more complicated now? It's like we had an axe 10 years ago. We could chop down a tree an hour. We could do 8 trees in an 8-hour day. Now they got a chainsaw. They don't stop at 8 trees. They're cutting down more trees. They're doing more intricate designs because now they can do it. So it still takes as long to make the movies,
just as long,
but they're more intricate, which is also interesting because one thing that they pointed out was this team that put together this new Coraline figure because they wanted to tour with one of them and put some stuff in museums and things like that. But this team had spent an awful lot of time working on Wildwood, which is their next film. So I've seen a trailer for it, a teaser trailer, which looks amazing.
Fun.
I don't know what the story is, except that the woods are scary.
Right.
And they look like they're going to be real scary. But they introduced us to their team of people who are going to be working on this. And I'm excited for that. And I'm excited that next week, and we'll be able to do a podcast before then, but we're getting Beetlejuice.
That's right.
So that's coming up. I know right now it's like every time there's a big release, Hollywood is just biting their nails, hoping that it does well.
Yep.
And they keep giving us interesting news about new stuff coming out. Whether it does well or not, I guess we'll see.
We shall see.
And with that said, we come to the end of episode 226. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.